to see my slides now, and should be a slide that says the Climate FieldView Plus overview. And let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to cover is what is Climate FieldView Plus, as we refer to it in the States, or a Climate FieldView subscription, as we might refer to it in Canada, and how does it differ from the free Climate FieldView app that I can download online and create an account for? Well, our free version of Climate FieldView, which anyone can go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download onto their phone or their iPad or whatever device they have there, it provides a number of different features. It provides field-level weather data. You can take scouting notes and pictures and share those with people in your operation. You can get various notifications of different weather events or things that are happening in your fields. You can import all of your historical data to the free version of the Climate FieldView system, where you can import 10 years of planting and harvest maps and have those available to take with you anywhere you go on your mobile device. So those kind of things are all available with the free version of Climate that anyone can sign up for just by downloading the app from either the Google Play or the App Store on Apple. Now, what we're talking about with FieldView Plus or the paid version of Climate are the four things that are listed on the bottom of this screen: remote view and split screen, yield analysis, manual script creator, and field health imagery. Now, I'm going to go into each one of those here over the course of the next 30 to 40 minutes here, show you what they are, show you how those features work. But those are the four things that we're talking about, just to level set on what is Climate FieldView Plus, or what is a Climate FieldView subscription, and what are the features that I receive when I make that purchase. So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, let's go ahead and I'm going to give a little bit of background on a couple of these, and then we'll go ahead and jump into using the live product. So first one is field health imagery. So these are satellite images of your field. And this map here for the United States looks a little bit complicated. But the main thing to know is that when you buy a Climate FieldView Plus subscription in the United States, imagery is part of it. And the caveat here is if you are not in one of the kind of orangey sections on this map. We provide field health imagery as part of a Climate FieldView subscription if you are in anything except the orange part. So all the blue, the greens, those are good. You're going to get imagery. If you're in one of the orange parts, imagery is not going to be part of your subscription. It's just because of the way that we collect data and which satellite providers we work with and which packages we have actually purchased ourselves. So just a caveat, when I'm talking about Plus and I'm talking about imagery, imagery is not available in the orange areas. When it comes to Canada, you will get imagery pretty much wherever you buy it. These are a couple of maps of Canada and the regions where we do provide imagery. So as long as you fall in one of those yellow areas shown on the screen, then you would have imagery access as part of your Climate FieldView subscription as well. Now, that said, what I want to talk about first is really yield analysis. This is probably, I mean, each farmer will look at our package and say there are different parts of it that they can see value in, and what any individual person values is going to depend on their perspective and kind of what tools they have available on their farm already. But yield analysis is one of those things that I think is probably the most valuable tool in the Climate FieldView Plus package. And the reason for that is that what it can really do for you is it can make your entire farm into a test plot. Not enough experimentation goes on farms these days because of the difficulty of both placing trials in the field and then analyzing the results of those trials later. Most of us just don't have tools that help make this easy, and so not enough experimentation goes on because we know that at the end of the season, we're not going to have the tools or the time to understand those results and make those decisions based on the trial that we put in the field. That changes dramatically with the Climate FieldView Plus platform. We make experimentation and analysis of results so easy that really, it's changing dramatically the way that most farmers are going about their planning for the season, and certainly their analysis at the end of the season. So how does this work? Well, oh, sorry, I went backwards the wrong way. So The question really when it comes to yield analysis is how quickly you can answer these kind of questions, such as simple ones. How many bushels did I harvest across my whole operation? What hybrid or variety that I planted was my highest or lowest yielding this year? If I put in a higher population trial somewhere, did that have a positive ROI? Did it actually make me money? If I sprayed a fungicide or an insecticide or I put some treatment onto the field, did it pay for itself? What was the yield gain I got for using that particular product? Or a nitrogen trial, did that pay for itself? And the question really is, do you ever get numeric answers to these questions? Or when you put in a trial, do you evaluate that by driving across the field in the combine, looking at the numbers on that yield monitor, and kind of getting that gut feel for, you know what, I think the trial was in this part of the field. It feels like the yield numbers are going a little bit higher here. And so I'm going to maybe do more of this next year because it feels like this probably worked. That is not yield analysis. That's sort of a gut feel. It seems like it works, but what we really need anytime we put a trial in the field or we try some different practice is to understand quantitatively, was this better, was it worse, and how much better was it for me? Did it pay for itself? And that's really what we're going to be able to do with the Climate FieldView Plus platform. Because we should be doing things like this in the field. We should be putting in test strips of different products and different practices in the field so that we have yield and results that we can analyze at the end of the season. And when it comes to yield analysis, yeah, we can get the weigh wagon out there and we can harvest strips, but that slows things down. And when harvest is going, we get busy, and the best of intentions, we put that trial out there. We hope that we can still find where it is, and the flags that we marked it off with are still there in the field, and we can kind of slow down harvest for a little while to harvest those strips, weigh them, and really write down the answers and make sure that we know what happened out there. But I think, as we all know, those best laid plans don't always work out, and harvest gets busy, and we just say, hey, we got to go, so I'm just going to watch those numbers on the monitor. That has to change, and that's what we're going to be able to help you with. So we'll move from a data analysis system that looks like this, where, yeah, I've got data in my monitor, yeah, I've got data on my thumb drive, and I have a desk full of papers and tools that could help me do data analysis if I was an IT guy and I knew how to bring it all together and make it tell a story, to something where all of our equipment data is centralized in one place with easy analysis tools. And that really ends up being the iPad. We put the iPad in the cab. We have all the data flow through to it. It's mobile. As it comes to the iPad, it also goes directly to all of the mobile phones in my operation. And everyone has access to every layer of data that was generated on the farm this year. We always say that every pass matters. It doesn't matter whether you're tilling, whether you're spraying, whether you're doing fertility, whether you're planting or harvesting. Every time you drive across that field, it has an influence on the yield that you're going to make at the end of the season. And so we need to get all the information about all those passes in one place so that we can really start to use that to understand yield and what were those drivers of yield in any given season. So that said, with that background, I'm going to jump into a product demo and talk about yield analysis first, and then we'll go ahead and we'll move on to both the field health imagery and the manual scripting that are part of Climate FieldView Plus as well. So let me go ahead and pull my iPad up here, see if I can get it to display on the screen. Give me just a minute here to do this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the Climate FieldView app. It's the black, it's at the bottom of my screen. It's a black background. It says Climate with an orange F. This is the app that anyone can go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download to their phones and create a free account. So type in Climate FieldView into your App Store or your Google Play account. You will see that app. Go ahead and download it. It will ask you to create a username and password, and you'll be off and running with the free version of the Climate FieldView account. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that, and I obviously have a paid version available to me, and I'm going to start taking you through these features, starting with yield analysis. So in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, there's a yield analysis section. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I'm going to switch to a particular year here, and what I'm going to start with is operation-wide yield analysis information. So the way our system works is that you plug it in the combine, and it just starts taking all the data that is being generated by your combine and putting it in the iPad. your data still goes to your 2630 monitor if you're on a John Deere, or to your Topcon monitor if you're on a or Borgo or whatever, if you're on a case, it'll be a Pro 700. Your data still shows up in your typical OEM monitor or whatever monitor you have in the combine. But it also goes into the iPad at the same time. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about how that happens, but for now, just accept that the data shows up here automatically. And so as the data shows up, you start getting reports, and I'm looking at it on an iPad right now, but anyone in your operation could be looking at it on their iPhone or Android phone as well in real time as harvest progresses. So the nice thing, one of the really nice things about this platform is that you don't have to do anything different than you already do. You go in the field and you do tillage. You go in the field and you do planting. You spray. You do fertility. You harvest. And all the data just shows up automatically on the phones and iPads of everyone in your operation, so that everyone has immediate access to those details that they might need to know to help them work more effectively through the season. And this is an example of harvest. So as I had harvested this season, each field, as I finished it, just showed up as a line in this report where it said, hey, the Macy's Creek field made 283 bushels this last year, and the Long Narrow field made 272 bushels. And we can scroll through and see what the yield was out of every field in the operation automatically. There's a little orange line there that says 239 bushels, which is the average yield for the operation, and that kind of just updates as each field is harvested throughout the course of the season. And we've got a summary at the top that says, hey, we harvested 3,300 acres, 800,000 dry bushels, 239 bushel average yield, and an average at 20.5% moisture. So this isn't rocket science. This is just field level yield, but the nice thing about it is that it shows up automatically. So if I'm the farm manager and I'm not necessarily the one in the combine, and I've got 3 guys in combines out in my fields, as they're harvesting, I don't need to call them and ask them how yield is going. I can see it live in real time as they pull out of those fields. These results are just going to flow through to my phone or my iPad and build up this average where I don't need to go out and grab thumb drives from the combines, pull them out, bring them to the computer, plug them in, download the data, and start being the IT guy to try and make all this work. It just happens automatically. Now, what can we do beyond this? So field level data is interesting. You know, what did each field make? That's kind of the start of a data analysis program. But one of the things that you can do here that becomes really valuable is yield by hybrid. Because if we use this system in the planter, well, then as we were planting, we were also building these geospatial maps that told us what variety or hybrid was planted in each part of each field. And as we harvest it with the combine, well, our combine knows what it's in. And so, hey, it's going to say, I'm in the Macy's Creek field, and I'm on the west side of it, so I'm in hybrid A right now. And as I move to the east side, I'm going to go to hybrid B. And it starts to put all the yield data in the right buckets, so that the minute you finish harvest, the minute you pull out of that last field, you can click on this hybrids button at the top of the page and see a yield report by hybrid, where it's going to tell you how each hybrid or variety on your farm performed that year in aggregate across all the locations where it was placed. So this report, in this case I have, I don't know, maybe I have a whole bunch of different hybrids and varieties that were planted on this farm because I have some yield trials that were out there as well. So I've got a lot of different varieties, but if I sort it to look at my most popular, I can see that, hey, the Calp 6277 was my most, the variety that or the hybrid that I put the most of out on this farm. I planted 494 acres of it. The average yield across all those 494 acres was 248 bushels. That beat my farm average of 239 bushels. So I'm already here just by doing what I was going to do already. Just by getting in the combine and harvesting, I'm starting to make decisions about which hybrids or varieties performed well, and I have the information here at my fingertips. I can see that 6277 was a winner this year, and if I need to take advantage of early seed purchase deadlines, I have the data here, my farm, my data, to tell me that, in fact, 6277 is probably something I want to plant more of next year. Now, my second most popular variety here, the 6208, I planted it on 422 acres, so a good chunk of my operation, but the average performance was 232 bushels. So that fell 7 bushels short of my farm average, and I had a pretty big investment in this particular variety. So now, again, my farm, my data, telling me that maybe I need to rethink 6208 and whether I want those genetics back on my farm next year or what I want to do with them. I can see that 64.87 beat the farm average, so another good one. 53.56 was close. 63.33 fell a bit short. But the goal here is to make actionable decisions off our data in a timely manner, where we're not waiting for someone to take those thumb drives out of the monitors, plug them into a computer, make the data talk, and then finally, maybe in January or February, get to results. Or it's certainly not an uncommon scenario that that data actually never leaves the cab and it stays in the monitor because we just don't have the tools to make it work. Those days are over. We're going to have results immediately waiting for us the minute we finish harvest, so we can use our farm data to make our decisions going forward about what's best for us. Now, we can go even deeper than this. So I'm here showing that 62.8 may not have been the best variety on my farm this year. The average was lower, but there's usually more to that story. This is a high level picture. So what I want to really understand here now is 62.8, well, why was it low performing? Was it dragged down by an individual field? Is there a story to that field? Did it perform poorly across the board? Let's understand it in a little bit more detail. And if I click on 62.8 here, it'll dive in there. So I say 62.8, tell me about this particular hybrid. And it'll bring up a report that tells me that hybrid was planted on, 7 fields, 422 acres. The average yield was 232. But you can see here that there's actually some places on my farm where it performed exceedingly well. That home place 1, it made 255 bushels. That Fred South small field, it made 251 bushels. Dave's, it made 249. So now what this this yield analysis system is telling me is that these are not genetics that I want to get rid of. Yes, the average performance wasn't what I hoped it would be, but there are certainly places on my farm where these genetics perform exceedingly well, and I do not want to be cutting this variety out entirely. What I see here is that there were a couple of places where it fell down. Green Valley made 205, so it didn't perform well in that particular field, and Clem South Gunderson made 224. So on a relative basis, it didn't perform that well there as either. So now I use my information as the farmer. What do I know about those fields? And maybe I know that Green Valley got hit with hail this year, and so that's an artificially low number. And so I don't want to penalize this hybrid overall because it happened to be placed in a field that had a lot of hail damage this year. Or maybe the Clem South Gunderson field is a really tough soil type, and most of my fields have good black loamy soils, but that Clem South Gunderson, there's a lot of sands in there. It doesn't hold water well, and so there's an issue there. And you know what? The fact that it made 224, that's actually pretty good for that piece of dirt. So we give you the information in a format that allows you to have that context to make decisions on your farm about what's working and what's not. And again, the key to that is that it all happens automatically. You don't have to be taking thumb drives out of monitors. You don't have to be an IT guy. We can make this happen and make it simple so that you can get to the numbers about what is driving yield on your farm and which decisions are more and less profitable for you. So that's kind of a field level yield analysis and operation level yield analysis tools that are available to every Climate FieldView Plus user. And not only are those available for next year in 2018 when you start planting and harvesting for 2018, but these are also available retroactively. If you go in and you load up your 2015 planting and harvest data or your 2012 planting and harvest data, all these tables and graphs that we're showing here will generate automatically for those past years, so you can go back in time and start to look at some of the patterns that have existed on your farm over time that you may not have had time or ability to see because you were never able to get that data out of the monitor. Okay, now I want to show you yield analysis at the field level, because then this stuff starts getting even cooler. There's the whole operation level information, and then there's, well, what happened at the field level and the subfield level, and what was driving yield? And this is where that concept of we don't do enough experiments on the farm because we don't know how to get the results out, this is where that really starts to play. So I'm going to pick one of my fields here. Let me actually do a different operation here. So let me pick one of these fields here. I'm going to go to this, and actually what I'm about to show you here, this is another feature of Climate FieldView Plus. When you're in the free version of Climate, you can pull up and look at any particular map. I could say, you know what, let me load up my planting data for this season in this field, and I want to look at a planting map. okay, I can see that I had a split planter this year, and I had half of the seed treated with quick roots and the other half not treated with quick roots. Okay, that's good, and I can see these maps, and I can look at them on my phone or my iPad or anyone in my operation who I choose to share this information with. Everyone can pull this up. Now, one of the features that is Climate FieldView Plus, or paid subscription only, is the ability to split the screen and look at two variables at the same time. So I can say, okay, I see what I planted there, but what were the yield results? And let's look at those side by side and pull up a yield map there. And this ability to split things and look at side-by-side correlations is part of Climate FieldView Plus. Now, what am I going to do here is, well, first thing to notice is all these maps are here when I use the system. I've got my as-planted maps, so I can look at my hybrids and see that I, in fact, split the planter. And I can look at my populations and say, oh, okay, it was a pretty flat rate planting this year. And I can look at my planting date and say, yeah, it all went in on the same date. We didn't have any replant that year. I can look at planter speed. I can look at spray applications. I can look at, in this case, soil data, things like, hey, what is my, here's my pH, here's my organic matter, here's my CECs, my P and my K. All your data in one place is a really powerful tool for a farming operation, because there's a lot of people that go in your fields over the course of a season. And if I was to go into this field at mid-season to do some scouting, I probably wasn't the one that planted the field. And so as I'm in the field and I see some striping pattern in there and I can't understand what it is, well, I can just pull out my phone and I can start flipping through these maps and say, well, why am I seeing the striping pattern? Well, let's look at each of the maps, and as I pull up that hybrid map, I may say, oh, I get it. It was a split planter in this field, and we had one treated seed and one untreated seed, so that explains it. So these kind of tools of just the ability to let everyone in the operation have context for what they're seeing in the field to help contribute to the next decision becomes a really powerful tool in and of itself. But what I want to show you here is subfield yield analysis, and how you can start learning from your experiments. So in this particular case, what we did is the farmer had, and this is a cornfield in Indiana, but the farmer had split the planter and treated half of the seed with quick roots and half of the seed was untreated. And wanted to understand the impact of this and how it impacted yields. So he could look at yield on a full field basis in that report that we were looking at earlier. So for example, if I do that, let me just go back here. Let me go to overview, let me go to my yield analysis, let me go to the right year, it was 2016 corn, and here it is. This landlord field, the one at the bottom, it made 143 bushels on average. If I click on landlord, it tells me, well, you had two different varieties or hybrids essentially in here. You had a quick roots treated hybrid, and you had a non-quick roots treated hybrid. And the quick roots beat the non-quick roots by 2 bushels an acre. Okay, that's interesting. Now, I might want to dive deeper on that and say, okay, well, quick roots is supposed to really help me in my poorer areas of the field where it's supposed to help make that nutrient available to the seed a lot better, especially in some of the poorer organic matter parts of my field. So did it do what it was supposed to do? And what can I learn about where quick roots helps me and where quick roots maybe doesn't do as much for me? So here's where I can dive into the individual field, and I can split the screen, and I can say, okay, let's look at my my soil map as a starting point, and let's look at my my organic matter. And what I can see here is that I've got parts of the field that are less than 1% organic matter, those places in the deeper oranges, and I've got parts of my field that are up to 4% or even 5 or 6% organic matter in this field. And so this is interesting because this will help me understand how quick roots affect yield depending on a characteristic that my fields might have in terms of organic matter. So if I pull up I've got my yield map on the right-hand side of the screen, and I want to know how quick roots affected it. If I pull up my planting map as an example, it's a little bit hard to see that because it was a split planter, and so I had all these different areas of one treatment versus the other. Well, what we built in here are simple analysis tools that allow us to just, with our finger, draw a circle and say, hey, tell me about yield just in this part of the field, and just draw a circle with our finger. And it's going to say, okay, you circled 3.4 acres with your finger. This happened to be the low organic matter part of my field that I circled. And in this part of the field, quick roots out-yielded non-quick roots by 4 bushels an acre. So I can start to build a story for myself that says, okay, in the poor organic matter soils, my farm, my data are telling me that I'm seeing a bigger impact than average in terms of the yield bump I get out of using quick roots. So this is the kind of yield analysis that the tool provides. It allows you to draw circles on your finger, draw circles on your field with your finger, and just make up zones. You didn't have to go out and flag these zones. You didn't have to use the weigh wagon and harvest these strips separately. Basically, your entire field after you harvest it is ready for, zonal analysis by just drawing circles over parts of the field that you know meet certain characteristics. So you can see how yield varies in those parts of the field and according to those characteristics. And this really changes the game when it comes to experimentation in the field. So that basically showed me that I had a 4-bushel yield advantage in my poor soils. Okay, well, what was my yield advantage in my good organic matter soils? I can just go ahead and, again, draw a circle here in the green area and say, well, how did yield vary by treatment here? Here, quick roots and non-quick roots seed each yielded 138 bushels an acre. So what I'm seeing here, my farm, my data, is that I didn't have any advantage to quick roots where I had higher organic matter in the field. So now this can really help me make some decisions going forward. I can say that, okay, I ran this test on this field, and then I could do the same thing on other fields where I'd split the planter and draw more circles and confirm that this is in fact a true signal versus just a spurious signal here. But what I might learn is that, quick roots is something that helps me in lower organic matter soils. It doesn't provide me as much of a benefit in high organic matter soils. And so now I've got some decisions to make. I could either get a multi-hybrid planter and start putting quick roots treated seed only. I could basically create a variable hybrid prescription and put quick roots treated seed down only where the lower organic matter soils are. So I'm taking the greatest advantage of that particular product and using it where it makes sense. But that would probably be a pretty expensive decision to go to the multi-hybrid planter if I didn't have one already. So instead what I might do is I might start looking at each of my fields and seeing what percentage of each field is high or low organic matter, and saying, okay, I'm going to use the seed treatment because there's a cost to it in the fields where there are large sections of low organic matter. And in the fields where I've got where more of the area is higher organic matter, I'm going to save money on that seed treatment because I've seen that I haven't seen as big a bump in yield from that in my particular data from my farm here. So that's the kind of cool stuff you can do when yield analysis tools are simple and when we can just have the data waiting for us the minute that we pull out of the field. Let me show you one other example. This one happens to be a wheat example, if I can find the right field here. So this one here is a wheat example, and I'm going to go ahead and split the screen again. I'm going to say, hey, well, let's look at my yield for this last year. And here's my yield map for the field. And what I can see, obviously, is that there's a part of this field that yielded a whole lot better than the rest of it. And what I want to figure out is why, because if I can replicate that across the rest of my operation, well, then that's obviously an opportunity to increase yields. So what I do is I start going over to the other side of my page, and I can come in here and say, let's look at my planting maps. Maybe it was something I did planting-wise. And I can look at my varieties. I can see that I planted a Westbred grain field in most of the field and a Westbred 4721 in the headlands there. But that's not telling the story. I can also look at my populations, and I can see that I did, in fact, vary population a bit in this field. But again, not necessarily telling the story of my yield here. I can look at planting date, and I can see that I did have a couple of different planting dates, one for the headlands and one for the rest of the field, but that's not the driver of yield. I can look at planter speed and see if, in fact, maybe we slowed down or we sped up, and that was the issue with a seed set issue here, but not showing as well. I'll shortcut the story, but basically the point is, when you use the Climate FieldView Plus system, all your data exists in one place. You can look at these correlations visually, and you can just draw circles, but you can find the answer to why yield is better or worse in certain parts of the field. In this case, the issue was that there was a particular application made. On April 18th, basically we went in and we sprayed something in the field, and as you can see, the yield increase we had there was higher in that part of the field where we did this application. So now the question for me is, well, I know this application has a cost, and so was the yield benefit that I got from it high enough to offset the cost of the spray? And maybe this thing cost me $20 an acre to spray. I don't know what the actual dollar amount was, but how do I figure out if this thing paid for itself? Well, I just come in and I draw some circles. I say, okay, what was the yield where I did spray this? And I draw a circle in the spray area. And it tells me that you circled 8.4 acres, and the yield there was 116 bushels an acre. Okay, now I understand what my yield was when I did spray this particular product. Now, let's go ahead and draw a circle not where I didn't spray. So 116 bushels an acre where I sprayed. I'll just pick a random part of the field here, and it says it was 80 bushels an acre where I didn't spray. So now again, I have my farm, my data, telling me that I have a 36 bushel yield advantage when I use this product. And I can go ahead and calculate, from that, hey, however much I'm selling my wheat for, did this or did it not pay for itself? Well, of course, this particular product certainly did. So I can now make a better decision going into next year that I'm going to try that product again, because on my farm I was able to prove that it worked. And let's talk about what the nice thing was with all of this. What did I not do in order to get those results? Well, what I didn't do was I did not get in the sprayer, go spray this little section of the field where I was running the trial, get out of the sprayer, put down some flags to mark off that trial. I didn't hope that I didn't have to hope, okay, I can't run over those flags as I'm out in the field later in the year, and I can't lose track of where they are. And then come harvest, what I didn't do was say, okay, wait a minute, we're burning through harvest, things are going great, but now we got to slow down because we've got the trial in this field. So let's get the weigh wagon out here, and let's go ahead and harvest some strips and write down the results, and hope we don't lose those notes about what those results were, and then we can go ahead and get back to harvest. Because how many times do you put a trial in the field, and you, with the best intentions, you want to go out there and get the weigh wagon and harvest those strips, but it's just too busy at harvest and you don't have time. So instead, you burn right through that trial, and you just kind of look at the numbers on the monitor and try and get that gut feel for did it or did it not work, and try and remember where it was. With this Climate FieldView Plus system, every pass you make through the field is mapped geospatially, so you know exactly where it was. And then at the end, when harvest is complete, you can always just use your finger to draw these circles on your phone, on your iPad, to get yield analysis results by section of the field, and you can break down your yield in any way that you might be interested in. It's an extremely easy and powerful tool to help you get results out of trials that you run in the field, and what it should do is encourage you to put more trials in, because you'll always know where they are, and you'll always get the results immediately after harvest. So that is kind of how that subfield analysis works. And I need to move on probably because I've got a number of other things I got to cover. So hopefully that all makes sense, both from a operational perspective, what kind of yield I make overall at the field level, and also how I can do subfield yield analysis as well to understand how a particular treatment might have worked for my operation. Okay, a couple last things I want to cover here in terms of what Climate FieldView Plus is are the satellite images, the field health images, and the scripting tools. So let me go ahead and let's do the field health images first. So when I'm in the tool here, in the Climate tool, there's a whole section called Field Health. And if I click on it, what it does is it gives me the most recent satellite map for each of my fields. And this is a part of the Climate FieldView platform. Whatever fields that you put in the system, if you are a paid Climate FieldView Plus or Climate FieldView subscription user, you're going to get satellite images for all of your fields whenever we can grab them. Now, we hope that we can give you an image every, 7 to 10 days throughout the growing season, but we just contract with a number of different satellite providers, and we pass you every image that they are able to capture where clouds are not negatively impacting that picture. So sometimes you'll get images 2 or 3 days in a row. If it's been cloudy for 2 weeks, you might not get an image for 2 weeks in a row. We don't really have any control over how frequently they come, but on average, it kind of seems like about every 7 to 10 days, depending on the cloudiness of a given year. And those images just show up here on the screen. Now, we're in winter right now, so we haven't taken any images for quite a long time. But you can see that the last image that came in from this fall was October 14th or so for most of my fields. If we were in summer, they would have a much more recent image, and these images would be more interesting. In most of these cases, these fields have been harvested, so there's not really any biomass out there to show. But I'll dive into one of these. Well, actually, before I do that, one of the things that we end up doing with this to help make these images actionable to you is there is a vegetation view, which is going to show you the relative biomass in each of those fields out there. And then there's a scouting picture that's going to basically dive in and dial up the contrast on each of those images to help us see truly what is the best and the worst parts of those fields, and how, so if we need to go out there into the field and find, you know, what's the best part or what's the worst part, we're going to highlight that more distinctly in a red or a green color. And one of the nice things about these maps, you may have a whole bunch of fields and you get all these images all the time. One of the things you might do is in the upper right-hand corner, you might say, I want to sort these by, and they already are. I can either sort them by newest or sort them by name or something, but you could also sort them by low biomass. And what it's going to do is it's going to float to the top, and we see with that FieldView field in the upper left, it says 14% of this field has lower than average biomass relative to the average of the field. So what this particular view has done is it said, if I'm going to go out and look at any field these days, FieldView, Nuez, Weinberg, these are the fields that have the biggest areas of problems and are the ones where I can probably have the biggest impact by going out there, seeing what the issue is, and seeing if there's something that can be done to treat it. We're going to float to the top for you the fields that are having the largest areas of problems, where there is a significant difference in biomass out there in a large portion of the field. Because if I'm going to go scout a field, I'd rather scout one where, hey, 14% of the field is experiencing a problem, versus if I go down to the bottom here and there's 0 or 1% of the field is experiencing a significant problem in biomass. So that's just, I think, a really helpful tool to help point you in the right direction as the season is going along. But what else can we do with these particular fields? Let me just go here and show you an example. So if I come in here, and I'm going to sort these by name, I'm going to look for this Monroe field. Where is it? Here we go. So here's a particular field, and you can see on the left-hand side of the screen all the images that we got last year. And I talked about we can't guarantee frequency, but you can see what it was for this particular field. We got an image on October 9th, September 29th, September 18th, September 16th, 14th, 3rd, 1st, August 23rd. So you can see that sometimes we were getting an image with a 2-day gap, sometimes it was an 11-day gap. It's just what the satellites are able to capture based on the clouds in the field. But if we take a look at this, you know, we can dive into this and say, okay, here's a particular image on June 5th, where here's what the image was capturing in terms of biomass, and we can see that, you know, there's a good section in the southern part of the field. It starts to get a little worse at the top, middle of the field, and we could basically watch this over time and say, okay, that's my June 5th image. Well, what does it look like by July 7th? Well, by July 7th, I'm starting to see some particular, you know, a straight line in this where it gets a lot worse at the top of the field. And something is done there that's probably human-induced. You don't tend to get a whole lot of straight lines in nature. And then when I go to July 17th, well, it's kind of gotten even worse. And what you would have been able to do with these images over time is, if I had gotten that June 5th image, maybe I could start to see that I need to go out there and look at that northern part of the field, because I planted it. I can look at my planting maps on the system, and I can say, you know what, I didn't change variety, I didn't change population. There's nothing out there that I did intentionally that would have caused that part of the field to be worse, and I might have gone out there and seen something that needed to be treated. And then come July 7th, I can say, well, if I, you know, now I definitely need to go out there if I hadn't. Well, hopefully I had gone out there on June 5th, and by the time I got July 7th, I didn't still see this pattern because I'd done something to fix it. And July 17th, it just, you know, kept getting worse and showing itself through. So the idea of these field health images is they are your treasure map to scouting. You cannot be in every field in your operation every hour of every day. And what you need is this top-down view telling you, okay, across all your 5,000 acres that you farm, most of it looks good, but here are fields 1, 2, and 3 that, you know, there might be something going on out there that you need to be aware of. And you can prioritize those scouting activities and get someone else to take a look at it. And the nice thing about these images is they're delivered in near real time. You're going to get this picture of a field within about 48 hours of the time it's taken. So, for example, this picture was taken on July 17th, 2017. We would have received this by July 19th or so of that year. So it's a near real-time view of the field. And then the other nice thing about it is that they're interactive. I'm looking at this map on my iPad, but I could also look at it on any of my Android or iPhone mobile phones. And if I had driven out to this field and I had my phone on me, I could park here along Limestone Road on the west-hand side of the field, and I'd see my little blue location dot flashing on top of this map. And as I started to walk into the field, I would see my blue location dot move across the field. And if I wanted to stop at a particular location, I could drop a pin there. I could say, okay, I'm here. I could add a picture to it to show everyone else in the operation what's actually going on out there, because maybe I'm going out to scout it, but I really need to get the picture back to the farm manager or to the guy at the co-op who's doing the spraying. I need to tell him where the problem is. I can drop this geolocated pin. I can take a note. I can say, you know, need to spray whatever here, product A here, and save that note. I can send that note via text to someone who doesn't have the climate system. I can save it. There's a whole bunch of options I can have here to help improve communication across the farm and basically find problems, note them, locate them, and share that information with anyone else that needs to know it. So that's really what these field health images do. They are a treasure map to scouting and can really help some of that mid-season diagnosis and helping make sure that little problems don't become big problems, and we're not surprised when we get in the combine at harvest and find that there's a 10-acre issue in the middle of a particular field. Okay, I need to move on again because we're running out of time here, but and again, questions about any of this, please do chat them in because I will stay on the phone and answer every question that comes in and get that done. But the last thing I want to talk to you guys about is scripting. So in scripting, I'm going to switch over to the mobile, or to the web app, but this can be done in mobile. I'm going to show it in web. Let's do this. Share my, oh, that's not what I want to do, sorry. Let me share. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to share my web browser here, and you should see it in just a second. And I'm going to talk to you scripting. And what we have is part of the Climate FieldView Plus package is super simple scripting tools. There is a lot of equipment out there today that is variable rate capable. A lot of people that can do variable rate fertility, variable rate planting, but not a lot of that equipment is actually used to do variable rating, largely because there are the tools that have been made available to farmers today have been fairly complicated, not easy to use, and just don't allow you to make the decision about how should I variable rate a field if I'm just getting started for the first time. Well, we have built the simplest scripting tools in the market today that really allow anyone to create and execute a script in a matter of minutes. And let me show you how it works. So I've gone to a particular field, and I want to create a new prescription. So I say I want to create a new prescription. I can either do a fertility script or a planting script. Either one of them is going to be the same process here, but let me go ahead and I'll do a fertility script. I'll hit start on this. I'll say I want to draw some zones. I'll hit next. I'm going to say that this is an in-season script that I'm going to create. And I'm going to say, hey, about June 15th, I'm going to do a fertility pass in this field. You can either do scripting for lime, nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. So I'm going to create a nitrogen script for this particular field. I'll pick the form of nitrogen I'm going to use. I'm going to use N28 here, and I'm going to broadcast and not incorporated. And I'm not going to use nitropyrin, and I'm going to hit finish. So what it does is it says, okay, you are going to put 28 on this field somewhere in June, and where do you want to put it, and how do you want that variable rate script to work? Well, the way that our scripting tools work is we allow you to just pull up any map that you have loaded to the system and underlay it in this script building tool. So I come in here and say, you know what, maybe I want to use my organic matter map as the basis for tracing a variable rate script here. Or, you know, maybe I want to use my yield map from last year as the basis for creating a script. You can choose whatever map you want that you have in the system, and I'm going to pull up a yield map from last year. And I'm going to say that, hey, this pretty much defines my good and my bad productivity zones. I've been farming this field for a while, and yeah, this eastern part of the field is always better than the western part, and this southern tip is always a poor yielding part of the field. So if I want to create a simple variable rate nitrogen script for this field to put more nitrogen in the good parts and less in the bad parts, I can just come in here and use the drawing tools. And I say, draw a polygon. And I come in here and I say, you know what, and I just click along here with my mouse or my finger if I'm on an iPad or a phone, and I say, okay, this is a good yielding part of the field, and I just trace the section, and there, and hit done, and I've defined a zone in the field, and I draw another polygon, and I say, you know what, here's another part of the field that's different. This is a bad part of the field, so let's zone that off, and I hit done, and maybe with that, I'm done. I'm creating a pretty simple variable array script, 3 zones in the field, and all I need to do is come over here and say, okay, I'm putting 28 on. How much do I want in the main part of the field? Now, in the main part of the field, I'm going to put 100 units of N on, and it will convert that 100 units of N to how many gallons I need. I'm going to need 33 gallons to make that work, given that I'm using 28. Well, now what about this other part, the good part of the field? This is my highest yielding part of the field, and I want to put on 130 units here. And then what about the worst part of the field? I don't want to waste a whole lot of nitrogen in there, and that part's never very productive. I'm going to put on 50 units of N there. I have just, in a matter of minutes here, created a variable rate fertility script for this field. It tells me a summary at the bottom that says I'm going to put on an average of 104 pounds, 35 gallons per acre is my average rate. I'm going to need a total of 1,821 gallons of 28 here to execute this script. And I can just save it. It will send that script automatically to my iPad if I'm using a FieldView in a 2020 in the fertility bar, or I can hit export, send it directly to my John Deere, or export the file in a ag leader format, a case format, a John Deere format, a Pro 700 format, a Raven Viper, a shapefile, or a Trimble. Basically, you export it in the format that matches your sprayer so that you can then take a thumb drive and plug it into the sprayer and execute that script. But basically, this is the process that our system uses for creating scripts. And what we've done is we've empowered any farmer in the country to be able to create a variable rate planting or fertility script in a matter of minutes by tracing an existing map that they have loaded into the system. It's super easy, it's super fast, and you can make it as complicated or easy a script as you want to do. In this case, I only created 3 zones, but you can create 10 zones. You can do whatever you want just by simply drawing regions in the field. There are some additional tools that make scripts a little bit easier as well. Like if I have a pivot in the field, I can say, hey, I got to draw a pivot here, and it will allow you to just quickly draw a circle and move that circle around to center it on the pivot so you can quickly draw some of these common shapes into your field. Another thing that commonly folks will do is they'll draw a square. You click to draw a square in the field, and you will basically put in maybe a test strip across this field that says, hey, yes, I'm creating a variable rate script, but I want a static rate to be run through this field as well, so I can do some comparison at the end of the season about how did my variable rate script yield compared to my static rate script field, so you can really understand how that might have worked. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about scripting, because I know I'm running out of time here, so hopefully that makes sense. But scripting is a simple and easy tool available for both seeding rate as well as fertility products in lime, phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium. Okay, that said, I'm going to see if I can get back to my presentation here. Okay. So last couple things I want to do is a couple last slides about how all this works. And I'm going to try not to go over here, but I think I can get you back to my slides. Okay. A couple more examples of what you can do with the system once you get using it. This is an example of a farmer who was, this is actually that same Kansas wheat farmer that I had showed a field for earlier. 2 things that are important about this tweet that I put out last fall after I visited him. One, this uses a feature called Remote View, which is part of the Plus package, where you can, I was in California at the moment, and he was out planting a seeding trial in a particular one of his fields in Kansas. And he told me he was out there planting it, so I used our Remote View feature, which allows you to, from anywhere in the world where you have an internet connection, watch a piece of machinery move across the field so you can see where he is. So I was in California, and I was watching him plant, and I could see in real time where he was in this field. And it wasn't that, actionable for me, but if you are a farm manager and you've got, 3 planters out in the field at planting, rather than calling them all the time and asking where they are, do you need to be refilled on seed, how much of that field are you done, when are you going to be moving to the next one, the Remote View feature allows anyone to go ahead and see in real time where a piece of equipment is in the field and how much of the field is complete and how much remains. And so that's just another one of those features of the Plus platform. But the other thing to note here is what he was doing in this field. because he was using Climate FieldView Plus, he was alternating with each pass what his seeding rate was in this field. So like his first seeding rate in yellow, that was planted at about 60 pounds an acre. This is a wheat field. Then he planted the next pass at 70 pounds an acre, and he planted the next pass at 75, and then he planted the next pass at 80, and then he put a pass at 40 pounds an acre. Why was he doing this? Well, you typically would not do this in a field if you didn't have access to a system like Climate FieldView Plus, because you would know that at the end of the season, you're not going to have time or ability to analyze those results. But because he had the system of the planter, and because he's going to be running it in the combine, he knows that he can just do what he's always done. Get in the field, plant, spray, harvest, whatever, and at the end of the season, he's going to draw a circle around that field, and it's going to immediately tell him what his yield is by population. He's going to build in his own field, using his data, a population response curve for this particular Westbred 4269, these genetics. And he's going to see that, hey, I start to see decreasing yield response when I hit 65 pounds an acre, or whatever the actual answer is. But the tool gives him the ability to understand, run a trial, and understand the results of that extremely easily just by planting and harvesting and drawing circles at the end. I think I have one more example in here. This is from our agronomist in Indiana, where he was doing disc ripper passes in the fall. So this was December 1st. He was tracking, as it says, tracking my disc ripper passes with FieldView tonight. I'm going to skip a few passes and see if it affects next fall field map. Every pass through the field matters. Every time we go in the field, we are impacting the yield that we're going to have at the end of the season, and we need to start quantifying what those, what it is and how each pass through the field is impacting yield. And so here, with the disc ripper passes, he's going to leave a little gap, and at the end of the season, he's going to draw a circle around that field and say, what was my yield where I did rip, and what was my field where I didn't rip? All these kinds of trials and things, the answers are going to be waiting for you immediately the minute you pull out of the field at harvest, without you having to do any extra work of moving thumb drives, placing flags in the field, using way wagons. It all just happens automatically. It can dramatically change and increase the rate of speed with which you can learn what's working and what's not on your operation. So how does it all work? I'm going to touch briefly on this. We can get data in the system in a number of different ways. If you use My John Deere, your data will flow through into the Climate FieldView platform automatically and be waiting for you there to analyze the minute you pull out of the field without doing anything different than what you normally do. If you don't use My John Deere, we have something called Climate FieldView Drive, which is a little device that plugs into the CAN diagnostic port of whatever piece of equipment you're driving across the field, and it passes the data via Bluetooth to your iPad in the cab. Your data still goes through to your OEM monitor, but it also shows up in your iPad, and you basically have two different ways to use it. And our guess is that you will stop using the data in your monitor, and you'll start using your iPad a whole lot more, because it's a whole lot easier with these tools on it. There's also data upload. I mentioned that these analysis results that I was looking at, you don't just get them for 2018 and going forward. You can upload your data out of SMS or out of old thumb drives that you have sitting around your desk, or out of an Apex system. You can push it all into Climate at any point using our data upload tools and start looking at, hey, what did I do in 2017? What did I do in 2015? What did I do in 2013? All this reporting is available from historical years as well. How does it work? I touched briefly on it, but this is what Climate FieldView Drive looks like. That's the device that you plug into the CAN diagnostic port of the piece of equipment that you're driving across the field, and it communicates via Bluetooth to the iPad, pushing all your data there. And that drive is essentially a universal translator, where we have taught it a whole bunch of machine languages, so that it doesn't matter if you're planting with Deere or Case, or spraying with Raven, or harvesting with Matthew Ferguson or Challenger. This is the universal translator, and it puts all your data into the iPad in a common language, almost regardless of what you're driving across the field. We're obviously not 100% compatible with every piece of equipment that exists in the agricultural world, but most of the major ones we are. So how does this work in terms of pricing? I'm going to give you U.S. pricing first, and then we'll talk about Canada. But in the U.S., Each of those drives is $299. You buy that and you plug it into the machine and you go. It can be moved from machine to machine. So if you have one planter, one sprayer, one tillage implement, and one combine, well, you only need to buy one of these, and you can move it as the season goes along into each of those pieces of equipment, and it will gather all of your data to put it all in one place. Obviously, if you're running 5 combines in the field at the same time, well, then you would need 5 of these if you were going to be capturing all your data. My John Deere is sort of the exception to that. If you have My John Deere, or if you're running a 2020 system from Precision Planting, then you wouldn't need these drives. Basically, your data moves into our system automatically out of either one of those systems. And the other option you have is if you don't want to collect data live in the field and you want to take the thumb drive out of the monitor and put it in the computer and upload it afterwards, that's certainly an option as well. Then there's the software. The software is $999 as an annual fee in the United States, and that is regardless of acreage. So whether you farm 1,000 acres or 50,000 acres, the price is $999, and you get every feature that we have talked about today on every one of those acres. So that is how it works in the U.S. In Canada, the pricing is slightly different. One, we have a Canadian dollar, obviously, to deal with, and the packages are slightly different. But in Canada, if you go to climatefieldview.ca, there is a pricing link at the top of the page that allows you to tell us how many acres you're farming, and your price varies a bit based on your acres, and your price also includes a certain number of drive devices. But feel free to talk to one of our Canadian dealers or call our support line if you have questions about Canadian pricing, but it's something is between 1,000 and 3,000 Canadian, inclusive of drive devices there. Last couple things, upcoming webinars. This webinar was really a what is Climate FieldView Plus, and a little bit more general than most of them that I do. I do these webinars usually about 2 a week on various topics that are going to be seasonally timely. So the ones that I'm doing here the rest of this month are on how to use the CAB app to capture data in the field, some basic topics, and then an advanced topics of some of the new features and functionality that we've added for 2018 for people that have been using the system for a while. I haven't yet published a March schedule of webinars, but if you keep that climate.com/webinars link in mind, and in the next week or so I will put up dates, times, and subject for March webinars, where we'll cover a whole bunch more in detail. How do you use a particular feature of the product to help everyone get up to speed and ready for spring planting? Last thing I want to mention is support. So this system that we looked at today obviously has a lot of features and functionality. It's a very rich and robust platform that is being used widely across the world. We have over 100,000 users. We have over 120 million acres. This is a product that we know works and we know can drive value for the farmer. So, but you have to learn how to use it. There still is a bit of a learning curve. And what we can do to help with that is we have something called the Customer Success Team, where if you dial our help number, it's on the screen, 888-924-7475, and you press option 3, you can set up an appointment with one of our customer success specialists who will say, okay, you're getting started with climate, and you want to make sure that it's going to work well for you this year, and so do we. So let's take some time. Let's set an appointment, and let's sit down and talk on the phone about all the things that you need to do to get set up properly for the coming season. Just something to make sure that everyone is aware of, especially if you are someone who is new to the system and about to use it for the first time this year. I would call them, set up an appointment, and let them just walk you through everything that you should have ready for planting so that there are no surprises and that you don't get in the cab and all of a sudden realize you don't know how to do something. Let them help you get ready for this year so that you are going to have a successful experience there. Last thing is what next? Check machine compatibility. If you want to use the system and you want to use our drive device in your planter, your sprayer, your combine, call our support line and just ask them. Tell them what you have. Hey, I've got a John Deere whatever number sprayer, and it's got a Green Star rate controller, and it's got a John Deere GPS. They'll be able to tell you, are you going to be able to use drive to capture data live in the field? Or if not, what some of your options are to get that data into the system so that you can use all of the cool tools that we showed today. You can order the system online or through your local dealer. So contact your local DeKalb rep, contact your local channel rep, contact your local CPS person, whoever it is. There's a lot of dealers around the country that can provide you this product and provide support in the field as well. Or you can order it online. Once you create an account and you go to climate.com on the website, there's an order button right there in your account as well. You will want to import your historical data. Almost all of us have thumb drives around the office, or all of our data in Apex or SMS or Mapshots or somewhere. Our data is somewhere that it currently isn't super useful to us. We want to move it out of those systems and put it in this mobile platform so that wherever we go, we can always pull up our phone or our iPad and say, hey, what did we plant in that field in 2015, and what were the yield results, and what was driving yield? You can now have yield analysis with you wherever you go, so that when you're sitting on the couch watching TV, or on vacation on the beach in Florida, wherever it is, you can always go back and say, you know what, let me see what happened in that field that year. And the data is going to be at your fingertips at all times. There's always an opportunity to learn. You can sign up for webinars. We talked about that before. And I would highly recommend calling our support team. They are fantastic people. You'll get a live English-speaking person in our St. Louis office who has an agricultural background. We have great, fantastic support people, and they can answer almost all of your questions. I travel a lot, but I also want to be available to you to help where I can. So if you have questions, I've been at Climate for a really long time, so I have the very simple email address of jeff@climate.com. Because when we started the company, we said, hey, we don't need last names. There's never going to be another Jeff. But lo and behold, now there's a need for last names. But I got the simple jeff@climate.com email address anyway. So if there's anything I can do to help you, please feel free to send me a note. I'll try and point you in the right direction, or make sure that I get your question answered, and just let me know.